Let's start with something that sounds kind of fun, right? So when you know when a small business is growing, they're kind of focused on a lot of things, and cybersecurity can kind of come up at like the last second. Um, when do you guys think is like the best time for a small business growing to start focusing on it? Should it be like right from the start? Is there like a specific milestone you think is like the right time that they should really be like investing in that? What do you think?
So
Oh,
I
come
will just
on. All right, go ahead. I was gonna say I'm not trying to run this one, so
yeah, no, I'll go. I will actually say I don't believe that they should focus on cybersecurity at the very beginning when they're one, two, three, four, 5 employees, because I believe a company that size can outsource all of their cybersecurity needs for the most part to just whoever their email provider is for the most part. Because you're not at that point really running a file share that's going to be bigger than what like Google Drive can handle. You're not really going to be like running your own email server, for example. You're not going to be you might want to have like policies and stuff, but to be honest, you can copy and paste most of those from like any university website, control F the university's name and put your company's name in and be solid. Um, so I actually don't believe that it's something that you really need to worry about right off the bat, which might be like not a popular opinion, or maybe like is the taboo thing you're not supposed to say out loud. Um, but that's just kind of what I believe. I don't have like a number value for like number of employees. At what point you're kind of reaching that level. I think it probably happens differently for everybody, but I guess if I had to put like a roundabout number on it, I'd say around 20 full-time employees would probably be when you're starting to deal with that, because at that point the percentages of like, if I think a percentage risk game, right, for like a phishing attack or something like that, once I hit 20 employees, I see a much higher chance of a phishing attack or some sort of attack like that actually working. And because it's just a numbers game, kind of. And at that point, you probably have people in the company who don't talk to each other every day. So, like, when they get an email from someone who looks legit, they might not know who they are, but not want to look stupid. It's kind of like a rickety, dangerous kind of place to be at that point, I think. Um, and it's also, you're kind of reaching the point when you're starting to have your own, especially if you work in an office and you're not a fully remote team, you're going to start having your own infrastructure, where you might need a switch, you might need a router, you might need to segment different, IoT cameras or something onto a different network, because you have to, you know, start thinking about that kind of stuff. I would say probably about the time you hire your first dedicated IT person is the time you should start thinking about security. Maybe not hiring a security person full time, but certainly making sure that your IT guy is in touch with a security provider service like Open Security, for example, or something like that. Even if it's very like few far between, and even if Open Security or whatever company doesn't have much to do, they should be talking. Maybe just do like a call every 6 months or something like that. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but to just kind of lay that groundwork. So that's where I'm going to start the conversation, I guess.
I mean, do you think that's the same for no matter what industry you're in, or do you think like different industries have different requirements? Like, you can have a small business in, I don't know, let's say gas and oil, or you can have a small business in security, like you open your own security firm, right? Should you have security yourselves, right? Is it the same for all different industries in your opinion, Ryan, or does it change up based on different potential industries there?
So thank you for teeing that up for me, because this is a thing I've wanted to shout from a mountaintop for a couple of years now. Um, every company, every industry in the world is an internet company now. There is no such thing as a company, well, not one that has any sort of like meaningful need for cybersecurity, at least, that is not an internet company. Like maybe the plumber who lives in your small town is not an internet company because all he does is word of mouth and people just know him. He's the guy. But if your company has a website and uses it, like you're basically an internet company now, because all of your service providing, all of your customer support, everything is going to be driven through that. Which means no, in my opinion, it doesn't, like a manufacturing company of the same size as like a bank, as the same size as like a small clinic or like hospital kind of thing. All those different companies, to me, they are internet companies and therefore have the same needs from a cybersecurity perspective, because they have company data, they have infrastructure, they have systems that have to stay up all the time, and basically, I don't see a difference. I see the threats may be different industry to industry, but ultimately, the steps that you should be taking to protect yourself should not vary, because everybody's on the same internet, writing the same kind of services and using the same stuff. So no, I don't see it. In terms of like the number, again, like I said, I don't really want to put a number on like the size of the company where people should start worrying. Like I said, 20, because it's kind of, I don't know, sounds good. but that doesn't mean anything. It's just my opinion today. It might change tomorrow. And like I said, I think just once you have a dedicated IT person, right? The guy who, when you get someone newly employed, you always go to the same guy all of a sudden to give him his email account and that kind of stuff. And it's like his job to do it, not like the founder's, side job because no one else does it. That's about the time when I'm probably like suggesting people start calling for a cybersecurity something.
Cool.
Tweet. End thread. Got it.
Yeah, it's funny. You kind of stole my question already, which was, it doesn't matter depending on the company, but I guess not.
To me,
so
I'm happy to have you. I'm happy to debate you guys on it, or have you disagree. You might change my mind.
I don't know enough to debate it.
I think it does matter. So like for say like an open security, right? So it's like we have to have our own stuff in line, right? I mean, we're doing security assessments for other organizations. We should probably have similar security. Whether that means like you have a policy for like I mean, what is security, right? I guess we could ask that question. What is security at a small business? Is it policy based? Does it require your employees, if it's bring your own device or anything like that, does it require your employees to have an antivirus? Does it require your employees to keep confidential documents a certain way, right? That could be security in its own. It's a policy saying we have to do X, Y, and Z, right? If you don't have any infrastructure per se, rely on your providers like your Outlooks or your Office 365s or mail clients and things like that. But also like what do you at what point do you require, like a policy around like should you have that antivirus? Maybe you don't say which one or you don't pay for it, or maybe you do, right? But like at what point do you do that? I think that should be almost on the beginning. So if I have a new company with 5 employees even, I prefer them all to have antivirus and then also have a policy about where they keep their documents about that are business related, right? And I would call that security in and of itself.
I think no, that's valid for sure. It definitely, especially for a cybersecurity company. And that stuff gets built in when you're in that kind of industry, I think, to a large degree because people nerd out about it. Because like for us, right, like our stuff's mostly cloud based, but I've configured our cloud stuff, right, to be secure because I just know how to do that. And I spend the time to it because I think it's important. So no, you're totally right. I will say though, I don't think that we're really significantly more in danger than we would like than any other company of our size just because we're a cybersecurity company necessarily. Because again, the cloud defaults for stuff like O365 are fairly good for a small company. They're not awful. Like they're sane defaults for sure. So yeah, I mean,
there's nothing wrong with WordPress.
Yeah, well,
that was definitely gonna be the other thing. I was like, okay, what if you got a WordPress website?
So here was my I was gonna jump in at some point. Mostly I was thinking, but I think it's okay to have a certain amount of like tiered security. So like what you first said about, as the company is small, utilizing reliable third parties to implement security for you. I think that's a really good way to go. I don't think everybody knows that. I think a lot of people might hire a random guy off the street to create a website and store that on like a local server or something. I mean, I don't think it happens as much as it maybe did 15 years ago. But I think that maybe that's a concern, for me. So I would say as the company increases in tier size, because maybe at a lower level, you just want some consulting, somebody like you to come in and configure and make sure their cloud stuff good. It doesn't have to be full-fledged compliance and pen testing. So maybe I would say, a tiered approach, small security for small company.
Yeah, for sure. The WordPress thing is kind of interesting that you bring that up, right? Because obviously everybody hates WordPress, but it's also like, what, Jaeger, you actually know this. What's the percentage of sites in the world that are like WordPress sites at this point?
It's something ridiculous. It's like over 60%. It's crazy.
Yeah, but the truth is, most of those WordPress sites aren't hosted in anybody's home or on anybody's like internal network at this point. They're all probably hosted on a third party, correct? I would think. I mean, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I think like default, it just goes that way now, which is good.
Right. Like 10 years ago, like I tried to make a WordPress site and obviously I did it on my computer because there was no such thing as like a Bluehost or like GoDaddy hosting for a WordPress site, like, so I don't, yeah, I mean, I understand that like a small business with a WordPress site, they're probably going, actually, I personally know somebody whose site got taken down by, I mean, I'm just going to say Chinese people because there were Chinese characters in the website, like when they went to it. And at the end of the day, it sucked, right? Like his business it's a bad look for your business. But he didn't lose anything, right? He backed it. It was backed up by the service provider, and it was back up the next day. So yeah, I totally agree. WordPress is like, it's funny, but yeah, like Jaeger said, so many people are using it still. So there's got to be something to that. It's got to be good enough, I guess.
So what's your opinion of like other cybersecurity firms that would have a WordPress website as like their website?
Well,
Ooh, that's dangerous.
Jaeger. Is our website a WordPress site?
It might be.
I'm pretty sure our site is a WordPress site.
It sure is.
I just see a meme like of somebody walking slowly
So
away.
I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say anything at all about that question, Nick.
No, I'm honestly curious because, like, obviously, I've dabbled with like my own stuff in the past, and I was doing WordPress as well, right? And I'm just honestly curious, like, what's your opinion of it? And I mean, I honestly don't. My personal opinion is I see its value and I see its risk, right? So as long as you have that WordPress, like you said, third-party hosted probably, and it's up to date, and you have the patching, and maybe you're paying for WordFence like Pro and things like that, like you've got like the proper things, and as long as you're not doing anything where it would be, yeah, you might have reputational risk, like you said, your buddy's company who had his page breached and maybe like defaced or things like that, right? But other than that, there's no risk to your infrastructure because you're not hosting it. And as long as you don't have any critical data inside or that's being stored in whatever it's hosted on or things like that, I honestly think it's a good tool to get your name out there and to build a quick website with branding on it, to be honest.
Yeah, well, and for us, again, I don't mean to make light of it. We have a WordPress site, sure, and there's inherently nothing wrong with a static WordPress site, which is essentially what our website is. It's just a bunch of pages. I think there's a contact form and whatever. Now, if you start selling stuff and you start making reservations for your service and all that kind of stuff, like, yeah, you have a exploding, ballooning level of risk that you should be talking to someone with a security minded kind of just whatever about it. But for us, we are a cybersecurity company. We have a WordPress site, and we barely, we don't really use it other than to convey static information. And so there is, again, nothing inherently wrong with a WordPress site. I just thought it was funny that you asked that question, like, and I'm like, well, I guess they're awesome because Open Security has one, and I don't want to say that, but it was just kind of funny the way that came up. So,
well, it's one of those things too. Is there's probably a lot more websites that are WordPress than you even realize. Like, it's harder and harder to like look at one and go, yeah, that's a WordPress site now.
That's true.
Yeah, because they have all those vulnerable themes added. And plugins.
Yeah.
All right. So
You're not wrong.
Okay. So back to the small business thing. Not to step away from the WordPress conversation because it's fun. But I was just thinking. So in some cases, you have businesses that don't necessarily start small and grow big. Take state and federal infrastructure, for example. Let's say take away federal infrastructure. Let's say state infrastructure. So think about like a small time sheriff's office or Department of Safety that runs prison services. That's critical infrastructure, but they don't really begin on a small level. Maybe they just always are a small level. So I think that there has to be, well, I don't know. I'll just leave it at that. Like, what do you think about the difference between that type of business, so to speak, compared to private business?
I think you got a good point there, right? Like, your business could have only 5 employees, but it doesn't mean it might never grow larger than that, or 10 employees, right? It could be a 20-year employee, and you could even have like a critical infrastructure or things like that with that many employees. That throws a curveball into Ryne's theory over here. I think that I think we should look at it maybe not versus how many employees you have, but how mature you are or mature in your industry, right? if you're like a brand new company and you started a month ago, right? Maybe security, most likely security is not your priority. Let's be real. It's not for any company that's a month old. But 5-6 years down the line, there should probably definitely be a piece that's a big portion. I mean, not a big portion, I guess, because companies are always looking for money, but a portion of your organization should be security minded, or you should have maybe a contracted company running security for you, even if you only have 5 employees. You should have that policy in place for antivirus. You should have proper security controls in place. Maybe with 5 employees, it's not going to be a lot. Let's say, right? But I think like Michael was saying, I think these companies that are going to always be small, but maybe in 10 years, I mean, that's as mature they're going to get, but they're running, critical items or infrastructure or other things. They've definitely got to think about security at a certain point. So maybe I would say after your first year or two in business of being successful, I think maybe is where you can maybe consider security versus how many headcount you have.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I did say 20. I'll own that. It's not a hard and fast number. I think you're right. Like the maturity thing definitely makes sense. I wonder if like a timeline like a year or something is also not going to be great. It's not going to be one size fits all, because some companies aren't very successful and then they blow up, right? And that changes the whole timeline and everything. So it's a feel thing. It's an art. It's not a science. I think though, like, I guess if I'm thinking like, let's say you have a company and you use the internet for some part of your company that in some meaningful way, which is a lot of companies, right? Can you, with good conscience at this point, go a full year without even talking to someone in security, even if it's like a free conversation, where it's just you find someone on the phone or on LinkedIn and you just hit them up and say like, look, I don't have money to pay you, but can you just give me like a 5-second rundown of what the most important things to think about are?
I mean, I can tell you right now that 98% of new companies don't even have that mindset that you just mentioned. 98% of new companies, security is on the back burner until it becomes an issue. And let's be real, even let's say at this point in stage, 95% of small businesses probably don't care about security. Unless they're maybe developing web applications or they have their own developed web application where they're going to look for securing their web application. But what about their internal security? I mean, I know home building companies that my parents are in the home building industry, so I know home building companies, and they're developed organizations. They have more than 20 employees and things like that, and they have IT staff, but there's zero security concerns still, even from the IT staff. So I would even say that 95% of all small businesses don't even care about security, or maybe not care. They don't have the mindset to understand security at the moment.
Yeah, we've worked with clients like that, at Open Security too, like where it's a big company, they're a software development company, and like, I mean, not a big company, but they're good. They're making tens, 20s of millions of dollars a year, so they're not small at that point. And they just got wrecked, by a hack, and then they had a 3-person IT team, and they were like, "What do you mean? There's a cybersecurity like industry?" They didn't even know that they could have called to get a pen test, 6 months earlier or that kind of stuff. There's a huge lack of education, and people are getting 95%. I don't think is a bad number at all, of companies that are just there. I don't think it's a willful ignorance. I really think it's just a total lack of exposure to it somehow. Because in our world, it's all we ever hear about, but obviously that's our world. So
I think you have differing business models too that go against. They're not productive in the area of security, because you have a company that is, let's say that a small company made up of engineers. They start up the company. They decide to like do something creative or something they're passionate about, and they've created something and they go forward. They might have a better propensity to use some outside consulting and try to get an idea of like how their security footprint looks. But then you take a different company that has, so their business model is, we have an idea and we're going to start with marketing and move forward with marketing until we can make enough money or get enough investment to purchase engineers, and then have those engineers make the idea come to fruition. That's probably going to be a lot different aspect, because they're going to be putting all of their investment money into more marketing and investment until they get to the point where they're producing something. And then, I mean, that's just my assumption, but, and then they start producing something which includes producing more money. And, they still might not even be of the mindset that, oh, we might want to secure this type of thing.
Yeah,
We have
well,
intellectual property we don't want to lose, or, whatever.
right. Go on, Nick.
I mean, I even know like CPAs or your taxes and your accountants and stuff like that, and they do the most minimal security. They have an IT person that they hired. It could be even like a small 5-person, CPA or accounting firm, and they have. I mean, and they're great at what they do. They're great accountants, but they hold all this critical information on their clients. And they're doing small business taxes. They're doing. I mean, I've done it. I've done business with them as for taxes for myself, right? And when I look at their infrastructure, it's like, okay, we had an IT guy and he told you about antivirus, and he told you about this, but it's they've got all the like Michael was saying, they've got like marketing, they've got all these ideas and that they want to go forward with, and they think about things, but they don't think about protecting any of their data, to be honest, because they don't think that they're going to be a target. Is really what I think it comes down to. Is a lot of these small businesses are like these big hacks that we see in the news are like Target.com, right? Or these other big companies that are getting hacked, or there's ransomware. Why would I be a target? Nobody's going to come after my small CPA firm or my small accounting firm where I have 4 employees and 150 clients, or whatever the account is, right? They're like, I'm not a target to these hackers. And really what it comes down to is, and we all know this, it's opportunity. If a hacker runs into you and you're easy, they're going to go after you, right? And I think that's a big misconception in small businesses, that they don't think that they're going to be a target. So why should I care about security?
For sure. And I kind of want to make a point too, somewhat along that thought, is that this isn't unique to cybersecurity either. People think they're safe all the time, like walking down the street at night, people get mugged or whatever, and they're not necessarily people's houses get robbed, right? So
I was going to bring that up anyway.
Right. So I don't want to bring up your business, but whatever the heck is going on. But cybersecurity is not the only place where people just don't do risk analysis and assessments and take that into account for the decisions they make. Like, how many times do you see somebody driving drunk, right? Like, why do you do that? Nobody knows why you do that, and yet people continue to do it. So it is a human thing to a large degree, but the thing about cybersecurity is it's so big that millions of people are impacted when somebody messes up. When a driver drives drunk, they might kill a handful of people, which is tragic and sad and obvious, but it's not a statistic like a million. So I think that's kind of something we probably forget about in the cybersecurity industry a lot, is that it's really just risk management. That's all cybersecurity is, and people in general are bad at risk management. We shouldn't feel like we're being picked on as cybersecurity people, because no, we're just not.
Yeah, I think humans every day are bad at risk management, and drunk driving is a great example. People get into their own vehicle and drive. And I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying, people get into vehicles and drive drunk all the time, or drive impaired, or drive tired. That's even more, how often do you know somebody, or have you been somebody that is driving tired on a long trip? I mean, it can be as detrimental as, yes, there's a motorcycle, drive on the house. Yeah, it's detrimental, as other things, but we don't do like a reasonable risk analysis, like a formal risk analysis, unless you're in the military, before you do something, and that's essentially what happened to me. I know the requirements to make a safe house, to make a fortress, but it was a combination of factors that ended up making a weak point for my own home. Basically, I was working a lot. It was a busy week. It was the week that kids started school. It was, some smaller locks and some lower fences. And I had just uninstalled an old alarm in preparation to install a new alarm, and that's when everything hit. And I think that a lot of times that's the case. It may not be, a conscious decision. And sure, I probably knew that was a weak point, and I should immediately shore up doors, windows, etc. But I didn't, and and somebody chose that time to break in and steal all my computers. So it's really terrible.
Laughing at him.
I
Yeah,
don't know,
right,
if
right,
you heard
right.
about that or not, Nick, but
I did not hear about that.
yeah, it was like $30,000 worth of computers, and that sucked. That sucked real bad. Um, and I think that that's a really good lesson for not to be that person that's like, well, it's probably not going to happen tonight. I'll just accept the risk, because I think a lot of times, even though we don't formally identify risk and accept it, we are accepting some amount of risk, because that's what it requires to live. So when that gets too great, bad things happen.
Anyway, Nick, yeah, so Michael got robbed.
Yeah. Well, actually, now that I like remember, I think you posted some. I think you posted something, or you might have told me, Ryan, at one point. I do remember that now. I do realize that now that you mentioned that all your computers were stolen. I was like, oh wait, yeah, I remember Ryan mentioning that. So, oh, that's
Well, and then let's talk about that, right? So then what did you do next, man? Like as the the guy in charge of security for your home or whatever for your family, what did you go out and do next? You probably did the exact same thing that every company in the world does as soon as they get hit with a cyber attack. You spent a ton of money to make sure it never happened again.
Well, and to be fair, that ton of money was like a quarter of what I lost. So had I done that in the beginning, and the whole reason that I was switching alarm companies is because I was not pleased with the company I had for their rate. So had I not done that, that probably would have that probably would have negated the whole problem. But I will say that in preparation for all of that, I did have 98% of my data backed up because I have incremental backups. I did have insurance, although it ended up not being super helpful. But I did have all of my data encrypted. I did have BIOS passwords on all my computers. So they basically stole a bunch of like paperweights with apples on them, or I mean, and then so then after the fact, I cleared every weakness with, my dog was older. I purchased an elite protection dog. My alarm was not installed. I fixed that very quickly and reinstalled it. I purchased a super huge safe, and essentially it was just a different rule set. I had gotten lax in my rule set of day-to-day living, and it was just weak enough to allow somebody to, cut the loss off of my studio and bust in. So
that's so funny. Yeah, like the amount, it's great. Like you bought an elite guard dog.
True.
Right?
I do laugh at that.
Is that not just the most cybersecurity? Isn't that not just the most cybersecurity thing you've ever heard of, though? Like it's like a perfect metaphor for so much of, like so many of the companies, right? They're like, oh, well, now we're gonna buy, 18 high tech firewalls because we got hacked. And it's like, okay, like yeah, I mean, great, good on you. I'm not judging you, but like it's funny that like all of a sudden this is the most important thing in your life, and you're gonna like come hell or high water, this is not happening to you again. And for me, I'm sitting here like, okay, like I should buy an elite guard dog maybe because like my house hasn't gotten broken into yet, but I know that's going to keep them out. So if you could, yeah, it's funny how that it translates to the real world, out of the digital cybersecurity world. Anyway, so
I mean that's interesting.
Go ahead.
I look at it. I look at it from from prevention. So I mean, I probably have like over $150,000 worth of servers in my server rack here, right? I'm like, have fun stealing that, but like I also, so I look at prevention for prevention or not prevention. I look at it as detection still, kind of like how you look at cybersecurity. I got cameras in my house and things like that would alert me live, when it's happening. And I'm pretty sure they're not going to be able to get the whole server rack out of my second story area by the time I could see that camera feed, unless I'm in the mountains and on service, right? But I look at it as, let me detect them stealing it or whatever. And then obviously my other thing is, I'm never really too far from my house, unless I'm in the mountains, but then there's other people that can monitor my house. But you look at us, I mean, I lockpick, it's a hobby, right? Lockpicking. And I remember distinctly where my mom's neighbors, I was over at my mom's house having dinner one night, and it was like -10 in Denver or something like that, right? One day. And she's like, hey, I just got a phone call from our next door neighbors, and they have that Nest thermostat, right? So, the IoT thermostat. And obviously it's connected to their main network, so don't talk about that. But anyways, they got this Nest in their house. And she's like, they haven't been able to connect to the Nest for like two days. So they gave me their garage code and like, can you want to come with me? Because I don't know anything about technology. You want to come with me real quick next door and look at what the heck's going on? So we go to the garage and like enter the garage code, and she's like entering it, and the batteries are dead in the garage code reader, like the number pad. She's like, I gotta go get batteries. I was like, well, I have my lockpick kit in my pocket. So I pull my lockpick kit out, and I'm like, awesome. Let's just, I'm gonna look on the front door. You think they're okay? She's like, no, they're really worried about this Nest. I'm like, all right, cool. So I go in, I'm like, I'm in there. I just go to the front door, and I put my lockpick in. I'm using a rake, right? Just a rake. And this is a house in a nice neighborhood, like a Schlage lock, like they put in every house. And I'm just like, put it in. And I just start raking. Before my mom gets back up the driveway, they're next door neighbors. Before she gets up the driveway, I'm like, boom, I'm in the front door. She's like, what? So like that, I mean, I think that is from my perspective. I'm like, okay, well, no matter what I do, I can put a $1 billion lock on my door. I could, put alarms on my windows. But all it's going to take is a brick or someone who has the skills to get into a building to just get in. So there's only so much you can do, right? And the guard dog, I think that's hilarious, because that is actually like an option where it's going to be prevention versus detection, right? It's like, oh look, I'm going to get bit, but I still feel like just monitoring myself is my best ability, because I mean, if I want to get into a building, I know I can get in. Like I guarantee I can get in. And if somebody else wants to get in, I'm sure they can get in. Right.
Well, it's just like cybersecurity, it's sure I might have expensive things in my house, but so to tell you a story, so I have film on all of my windows so they can't break. So the irony there is, the weak point becomes the lock. Well, one of my windows was not locked. And so the guy tried to come into the house. So I had an older dog, and I have tons of cameras. So my cameras actually did alert, but it just happened to not send to my phone. So it was just, it's one of those things where it was a bunch of things stacked together that should have worked. Yeah, exactly. And it should have worked. It should have been, something should have happened to deter it. And to effect, he didn't come in and mess with my family because my dog on the first floor barked, but she's too old to go up the stairs, which is why I'm gonna purchase a new dog. So it's certainly
so you were home.
Moment. Oh, I was home. Yeah.
Oh man, see.
That explains it.
Yeah.
Well, and so I don't sleep well. I mean, like, not to put my business out there, but because of like combat deployments and stuff, I don't sleep well. So I take meds that make it better for me to sleep. And so I was really hard to sleep, which is part of the reason I didn't notice phone notification. So it was just, like I said, it's just a bunch of things stacked against me that I probably should have prepared for better prior, or definitely should have prepared for better prior. So now I have to make sure that all the boxes are checked and have a different, just more strict set of rules to live by, which is the same thing that I would do on the computer. It's just sometimes it doesn't always transfer into your real life,
Well, and you had computers. So you had all your stuff locked down. You had it all encrypted. You had, your
BIOS passwords is my favorite.
BIOS locked down and everything. You're done. Like, in the world that you knew better than any other world, probably, like, you were totally set, and on autopilot, and it was fine.
So this is not a legal device, but have you ever thought about like making battery? Well, so it's like a Faraday cage, but it's got batteries connected to it, so like basically electrocute someone if they grab in a certain area, and like.
I have, sir.
Oh, okay, good. Because I like to think of like, okay, well, what would prevent me from stealing this stuff? I'm like, okay, physical harm. So what can I do to protect my stuff that'll cause physical harm? And so I kind of implement things like that.
The key is to keep it cool, because when you're running current through something, it's difficult to you have to be careful about the amount of current that's going through something to allow it to shock something but not burn up.
Set it so it triggers with motion detection, and then you can have a time limit so it won't overheat ever.
This is what my wife would call overcomplicating things.
Just so everybody knows, we do not condone booby trapping. Booby trapping is illegal in the United States, And
Yeah, I feel like
thanks
Nick is
to Hello
giving
Lawyers.
people like Home Alone advice, you know?
That's what my kids said.
Put
So
some
this
Christmas
is-
ornaments under the window, Dad. Like it's that simple.
This is totally whole own advice, but like I said, I mean everything's encrypted. Like I said, I have $100,000 of the servers in my house, and it's my lab, it's my production area. I mean, I do photography. It's got all my photo stuff. It's got personal stuff. It's got a whole bunch of stuff on it, and I'm like, that's a lot of money that I don't want to just walk out the door. So there are things that I like to do to protect it. I mean, maybe you look at it and you set up a thermite thing that just melts your servers. Who knows, right? I haven't done that one, but there's ways that you can set that up, and I could tell you about it if you hit me up personally outside of business time. But yeah, that's funny. So back real quick, back to your windows though that you have this protective film on. So I do charge a pretty high fee, but I would be willing to come in and do a test on that for you.
Do that. I would have to be you would have to be willing to wear the suit so I could
100%. 100%. I will do that as long as I guarantee I could break that window. So let's go. I will do that as long as I'm video.
You can break it, but it's just
Yeah.
really hard to get through. It'll take you like over half an hour to get through.
Oh, no. So we'll make a bet here. Give me 5 minutes to get through, and as long as you videotape the dog attacking me, we'll do it.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that.
Some good content.
Have you seen the CBON windows? Have you seen the film with covalent bond?
Yeah, so back in my previous life, or not previous life, whatever, previous jobs, before I got into security, I actually installed, I was a glazer. I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but we installed windows as well as like access control system, doors, systems, locks and things like that. So I've installed glass like that. I have tools, so I know I can get through it.
This is some content.
Well, we could at least talk about it. Yeah, insane.
I enjoy physical assessments, to be honest. Like I enjoy anything physical because I installed all that stuff. I mean, Windows and everything. Like I have my whole glazing kit. If I was allowed to do destructive engagements, like I have the whole kit that will cut the glass, and I actually have suction cups for Windows. So like I have the whole thing. I'm like, yes, let's do it.
But look at the amount of effort that you're going to when you could go to the neighbor's house. You know what I'm saying? Which is the same thing. That's like saying, yeah, I could write an exploit for Deer Day and get somebody, which is kind of back to what we were talking about. If somebody wants to get in bad enough, they're going to get in.
Right, 100%.
Which I mean, it goes back to like, look at the weak point in the window frame besides the windows. I mean, you have the lock. The lock's super easy to. Probably shouldn't say that, but I mean, the lock's not difficult to open, so that has to be fortified, and then you have the window frame that has to be fortified. So I mean, there's a lot of weak points, and I think it just has to be implemented in layers, which is the alarm, the dog, the meat with a firearm. So all of those things.
I mean, and yeah, you're always accepting some level of risk. I don't want to get this like twisted with people and them hearing like, well, we'll just eliminate all risk. Like, no, it's just
possible.
You cannot eliminate all risk, and so don't try to eliminate all risk. Just don't be the guy on the block who's the easiest to hack. And like, sorry for the guy next door to you.
Run faster than the other guy.
Exactly. Sorry for the guy who gets eaten by the bear, but at this point, the way everything kind of works is the low-hanging fruit gets eaten. So you just don't let it be you, and stay out of the game. And it doesn't take much effort to be a little bit better than everybody else at this point, in my opinion. So
I think that goes back all the way to our original conversation of, hey, when do you implement security as a small business? But like, let's look at the human nature, like you were saying, Ryne, is we just accept stuff. So 90% of the houses you get a lock put in, right? And it's a lock from the builder. And then let's say you buy another house. I mean, how many people actually go get new keys is one question, right? I mean, that's a quick, easy fix for you right there. If you don't get new keys, you're just allowing the person previously to break in. But let's look at the locks that are installed. Then most people don't know this, but from our perspective, how long would it take to get into a house with the default locks that they put in from builders? 30 seconds, maybe, right? But people are too trusting. Nobody understands that they might have a risk. They have a lock. It locks. I'm good, right?
Yeah. Well, how does the locksmith get in though? He's got a mechanical rake, and so it's like, yeah, you pay $30 more for a mechanical rake. Well, that's speed up the process.
Well, and that's kind of your silver bullet, right? Every oh gosh, we're gonna talk about vendors again. Okay.
Yes.
Every vendor comes in and talks about how their lock protects your house, but it's like, no, it doesn't. Anyway, sorry, we can get off that topic real quick. Man, this metaphor is getting way too real. But yeah, it's true. I think people, snake oil and again, locks are good. Don't get me wrong. Have a lock on your house, but it does not keep you from getting robbed, especially if you don't lock it. So,
hey Nick, I have an idea. I actually have to replace a couple windows that have already been filmed, so you should come out and we should break them.
Dude, I am down. And if you got like an extra one, we could totally do like a demolition ranch style, like tannerite in the window. Oh,
I do, and then we can just use that process to fortify my current fortress.
I'm down. I mean, I would get. I mean, your wife's gonna hate me after I say what you should do to like help. I mean, she probably already is like, why are we doing all this anyways? Except for all your stuff was stolen, so maybe not.
My wife is super smart. Yeah, my wife's super intelligent. She's usually the one that's like, "You're stupid for not doing that."
All right, fair enough. So maybe she'll be like, dude, why didn't we do this before? I mean, I would totally love this. Like, and this is something that I always thought about would be funny. And I can't remember. You do like red teams or physical assessments of like organizations, right? I can't remember what it was, but it was like 2 years or 3 years ago. I ran into a company that does it for like these rich millionaires, right? Oh, you guys have like a mansion, or you guys have these nice houses. They go and break into their houses, right? Like they go and just straight up break into just residential buildings. That's all they do. They don't do like businesses. It's all residential. And they just break in and they're like, yeah, this is how we would harden your house. And that's their business model. And I was like, man, that is freaking awesome. I would love to just break into buildings and like residential houses.
Doing that. Yeah, I thought about expanding doing that. We should do it. We should side company it. Open security physical assessments.
Yeah, of all these rich millionaires. I mean, I have some friends that I know people, so we could probably get into some of these rich areas, especially out here in Denver.
So real talk though, that company, I wonder. So you're talking about breaking into millionaires' houses. Now, the people that I would consider are the ones targeting millionaire houses, are the ones with the resources to break into a millionaire's house, almost regardless of what the millionaire does. And like we've already said, right? Like, and they want that house. They want that house. So they're gonna find a way in. So it's interesting to me that there's a company that makes a bunch of money off these residential, but it's like your threat is very targeted. It is. It is so strong. So to say I am going to harden your house and make you impervious to attack again is kind of like that snake oily kind of vibe. Do you have any more details about that?
So yeah, I would definitely disagree with your assessment there, though. Right. So let's look at. I mean, I'm talking like so. Let's say there's a neighborhood out here, Cherry Hills, or there's like 20 neighborhoods I could tell you that I live near, and the neighborhood's literally just full of. And the housing market's through the roof. So let's talk about that for a second.
Maybe $1 million isn't the right number. Yeah. Okay.
But let's just say you got these mansions and they're selling for $5-6 million, but you have a neighborhood that's got 60 of them, right? As a neighborhood with 60 like $5 million houses in it, right? It's not I'm going after this specific person. It's hey, I'm walking through this neighborhood, and yes, they have like neighborhood watch, or they have like their security gates and stuff. It's a gated community and things like that. But it doesn't. I could jump a fence, right? We all know that, and so that's what happens. These guys that want to rob, or even kids, to be real. I mean, there's been kids that are arrested, inside of millionaires' houses. These kids or these guys that want to go rob a house, all they got to do is find that weakest link. So it's not saying you're impervious to being broken into. It's hey, this is how we got in. And these seven. And the thing about that, what I remember reading about that company was, it's not they get in one way. They get in as many ways as they can, and then they look at all these ways, and then they say, hey, here's everything you could do to fix. And it's not you're going to be impervious, but this is going to make you harder than anybody else here. So it's pretty much the same thing that we were talking about earlier. Well, the next door neighbor's easier. Or, oh, crap, they've got motion detectors and alarms and light systems going on. I don't want to be in this backyard, right? Versus the guy next door has a light that's turned on all night, but it's on his patio and he's got a downstairs door that's unlocked. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, it's not fully saying you're impervious with the vendor snake oil. It's hey, we're doing these assessments against your rich community or your house because you have valuables in it that you don't want to be lost, and we're gonna make your security harder, because even $1 million house isn't gonna have the best security out the gate. It's still gonna have the same default lock that's installed. It's gonna have the same crap that everybody else puts in their houses. You might have some cameras, but it's all the same stuff. So it doesn't make you secure.
I think I need to update my frame of reference because I live in East Texas. A $5 million house in East Texas is a compound on hundreds of acres of land. if someone's trying to break in your house, they're trying to break into your house. They're not just walking
Right.
down the street. Fine. So obviously there is a difference. Yeah. I think I understand what you're saying now. It is still a neighborhood. It is still, people, it's high end neighborhood. So it's just my frame of reference is very different than downtown Denver, where $5 million gets you, what in Texas would not even be $1 million probably.
Right.
So no, I'm understanding your frame of reference now. So that totally makes sense.
My compound example, your compound example, you could still
I think monitoring makes more sense, or
We
monitoring
broke
is
into
still.
compounds in country all the time.
Yeah,
you can still harden your defenses though, right? So like if you have a $5 million area with a comp, like you call it a compound, like 100 acres, right? And you're being targeted. Yeah, you're being targeted, but you could still harden your defenses from probably what it is default, in my opinion. I bet they don't have like floodlights that are motion detected or things like that, right?
For sure. At that point,
Where
I think
you add-
detection and monitoring becomes the game again. You're back.
Yeah.
You're not preventing anything at that point. You're
And
moving to
space,
detection and monitoring.
how long does it take somebody to get to the house? Is the house easily available? Are there blockers in the way? Dogs, humans, guns, there's lots of factors.
But at the end of the day, if you're throwing a party and you have a catering company come in, right? Someone could just walk in the door and steal, be part of the catering company too. So
Yeah,
there's just
how do
no,
you vet
you're
that?
always accepting a level of risk, I guess is the point I'm trying to say.
But I mean, the thing is like football players. Football players out of town, they don't want all their stuff to. I mean, you can figure out who owns what kind of house, right, or what neighborhoods there are. There's like Broncos play all the neighborhood, so it's like okay, well they're out of town. But I mean, you can't all. You're gonna have a risk, right? You're gonna have to be able to accept a certain amount of risk, but the key for these people is they're trying to harden their buildings, so when they're not there, it's not going to be broken into. Like the parties, yeah, whatever. Someone's probably going to go missing at every millionaire's party. Let's be real. People like to pocket things, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's not like it's going to happen because you have more money than them. They're like, well, shit, this guy's got more money than me. I don't care. I want more money. I'm going to take this, right? So it's just a harden it. And I think it comes back to cybersecurity or, even physical security for organizations is you're going to always have a risk and we can always break into you, but what do you do to make it harder and detect it once it's happened?
The same thing. Yep. Just digital versus real world for sure. So now we need to ask the question, at what level of income do you need to start worrying about physical security for your home? Because we have to tie that into the small business. At what level of size small business do you have to start worrying about cybersecurity? And yeah, I still don't know the answer, but I feel like I'm probably more on the side of near immediately than I was when I started this conversation. So
That's the beauty of talking to friends.
Right. I kind of feel like now we should just all start selling residential and physical engagements. I think that'd be so much fun.
I've actually been looking into that for a long time. So yeah, we could definitely get together and do that.
Well, now you can drop your experience.
That's right.
As some clout, I guess, in the industry. So
right. There you go. Hey, I broke into. Oh, is Bill Murray still alive? I don't know. I can't remember.
He is. Yeah, I think.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure.
Bill Murray. Okay.
I'm not sure. I'll be like, hey, look, I broke into Bill Murray's house. Like, he hired us, and this was our job. Like, that'd be so cool. Just to have these famous millionaires or these football players like Peyton Manning. Like, yeah, I need you guys to come check out our house. All right, cool, we'll be there.
I feel like the NDA still applies though, kind of in the way as if you were hacking Google, right? I don't know.
Well, it depends. I mean, what NDA do they sign?
Yeah, but you can talk to me about it because I'll sign the same NDA, so we can just hang out and talk about it.
There you go.
Right.
Jaeger.
He's checked out.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Well, we are approaching our hour, but we can do another question to kind of move away from breaking into people's homes if you would like.
Okay.
I mean, unless you want to keep talking about that, that's fine too.
We can do a rapid fire round here for the next 5 minutes or something like that.
Oh man, you act like I have way more questions than I do. I'm just here to listen to you guys talk. I did have a request question though, which was, do you guys have any opinions, thoughts, so on and so forth about the difference between doing red teaming for a typical company versus a manufacturer?
So can you elaborate on that a little bit, or can you attempt to elaborate? As it was a requested question. Are you talking, the full incorporating red team where it's just, or it's like physical? I mean, it's everything, or is it just red teaming in the cyber world or the cyber sense? Because I have different opinions on that.
We can cover both if you got opinions on both.
Can you define quickly like what a typical company is versus like a manufacturing company, I guess? Or
when I say typical, I'm assuming that like, people think cybersecurity, they think tech company, they think,
Okay.
Like
an information technology company versus like a physical real world product company.
Yeah.
So would the company that I technically took down their entire manufacturing plant for 3 hours be a technical company, Ryne, or not?
Yeah. So I'd say they're a product. I'd say they're a product company. For sure, a real world. I mean, they also do IT, but I would say they're a physical product company for sure.
All right, I'll let someone else go first on that one.
I think one thing that I think we wrote a blog post about it a while back. I wrote it, so yeah, we definitely did. I think this addresses the question, is what I was trying to say. The difference between a company that does like operational technology, or like they build something, or they're running a water pumping station or a power company, versus like an information company, is the severity of the consequences. Basically, like I wrote a blog post basically saying something about a consequence-based approach to cybersecurity and how that is different from an IT company versus what I called an OT company, which really is just like the difference between like the digital world and the physical world. And the consequences are severely different, which means the risks you have to accept are they should be weighed differently. So for a manufacturer or like a water pumping, a water utility or a power utility, if they are hit and people steal their information, like maybe social security numbers or billing addresses and that kind of stuff, honestly, for them, I don't think they would be nearly as concerned as if like Google had that happen to them or Facebook had that happen to them, because it's not their business model. It's not where they make their money. That said, if they got hacked and the power went down or the water got poisoned or that kind of stuff, a lot of people are going to like literally die. And the consequences are so different. And so I think, a lot of times the things that we do as a cybersecurity company to protect people, they kind of are the same steps, because we're still just protecting the network mostly. At the end of the day, we're also protecting endpoints, which are all computers at this point. But if a power grid, endpoint is shut down or DOSed or whatever, that's much different than if a file server is taken down. It might impact 1 million people when the file server goes down, but they'll survive. They'll be alive. They're not physically hurt, versus like maybe a utility for a city, maybe like 500 people lose power, but it's a blizzard outside and they all freeze to death. So that to me is kind of, I wrote a blog post about it. It's called like consequence, essentially just saying, consider cybersecurity when you're talking about the difference between these two different types of company. Consider the consequences. Don't necessarily consider the front end. Consider what happens at the end. So that's kind of my tidbit of how I would approach it differently, one way or the other for different types of companies.
So I really like that idea, like the consequences, right? So it's going to have different consequences. But let's go back to, I was joking about it, but I did take down the manufacturing plant for like a Fortune 200 company for 3 hours one time on a red team, right? But that's rare. We don't want to take anything down, right? That's not our objective. That's not our goal ever. It's a mistake when it happens, right? So how do they realize or understand the different consequence, right? So when we do a red team engagement, we go do a red team engagement against an organization, we're typically looking at, we're showing what we can get access to, what data we can get access to, what systems we can get access to. But does that company fully understand the consequences of us shutting off a system per se, right? And I don't think we ever portray that when it comes to manufacturing of, hey, look, we gain access to your manufacturing plant, but they don't think, we could say it in words like we could have shut this down, but when you see that in a report like, oh, you could have shut this down, but you didn't, like there was no impact to us. We don't expect that to be a big impact. Do they really fully understand that consequence without actually having a negative impact? And I don't believe they do in the case. I don't know if the company I'm talking about fixed the vulnerabilities that caused the issue that occurred, but at the same time, you're looking at it and it's like, do they truly understand the consequences in a red team where there's not like an incident that you accidentally took something down, right? Do they understand the consequences of gaining access to their manufacturing plant versus just getting access to their data? Because we don't actually fully go on a red team. We don't fully go into that, hey, we're going to take your systems down portion, right? It's different when you can explain ransomware, but when you just say, hey, I'm going to take down your manufacturing plant, do they really fully understand that consequence? And I don't know if they do.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. You hope they do for sure, but you cannot ethically test it for sure. You can't create a disaster to test a disaster recovery plan. So you just got to do the best you can do within the constraints of what you have. But yeah, it is interesting because we cannot cause physical harm, certainly not intentionally. And we do everything we can not to. And sometimes things happen, but yeah, I mean, I think for the case of the one that you're talking about, for example, Nick, I think they actually did feel the consequences of that because it actually happened.
Right.
I can't speak to whether they solved the problem and fixed all the vulnerabilities, and or if any of those fixes that they did put in place are still in place today or configured correctly necessarily. But I know they felt it because I was on the phone call, so I know they felt it. But to what degree did they take action as a result? I don't know.
I do love being called a nation state actor. I'm just going to throw that out there.
You nmapped your way right into history, dude. So,
Oh, yeah, I know. It was great.
Yep. So good times. I'll never forget that.
Oh, my. That was the first time I ever done anything like that, too.
Yeah. It was like your first engagement with security or something.
I think my second one, or maybe my third. It was one of the first few.
It was pretty early on. We had some conversations about you. So.
Oh, yeah. Good.
No, I'm just kidding. We've always liked you. So. Cool. I think we burned out the hour. Michael, did you have anything to add with that rant?
No, I mean, I was just, I know we're at time, so I was just, no, I totally agree. So maybe, maybe talk more about evaluation via risk as opposed to company employee quantity or maturity. Maybe risk should really be the factor as to how you implement security.
Yeah, well, people talk about that with their budgets all the time. Like when you're budgeting, it's all real financial risk. They don't talk about their security of their information very often, though, for sure. Raw PHP. And he was like, should I delete this and start over? I was like, no.